Greetings, I'm Dr. Eileen O'Connor, and I'm going to be presenting overview information about some frequently used psychological, sociological, educational, and pedagogical practices related to teaching, training, and communication. There are going to be a lot of visual highlights of these common practices, and the slides themselves will give you links to a lot more information to help you integrate these thoughts into your design planning. At the outset, let me say there are no definitive answers as how to design effective digitally enhanced learning environments. You need to experiment with different approaches, but ultimately watch your students and that audience to see how they work and how they learn and continue improving your own development cycle. Any conversation about designing and developing learning environments has to start with the question of what has to be learned and why is this learning important? The answer depends upon the content itself and how the content is communicated. Are there going to be abstractions associated with learning the content? And where and how is applying the content important? Thus, any conversation about designing and developing learning has to start with the question of what is to be learned and why is it important. The answer depends upon the content itself and how this content is communicated. It's also important that you have a passion for your content and that you think creatively about how you can immerse your learners in the purpose of this environment itself. For this video lecture, the content has to be thought of broadly. For instance, content could be a process and procedure that needs to be understood and followed, or it can be an applied and theoretical understanding of a larger system such as government. Or maybe the content is about learning about the physical and natural world. Or perhaps it's about looking at our own human development through something such as theater and art. Content questions tie in naturally to the question of who are the learners themselves. Now, are you considering a youthful audience, mindful of how technology can inform or be integrated into these learners' works? Or are you developing learning and communication environments for adults, for training scenarios, or possibly for setting up procedures in computer-mediated workplaces? Or perhaps you're developing learning environments that use some of the more enhanced and emerging technologies that are becoming central to advanced healthcare applications, where clinical training is very important and needs to simulate real-world environments. Or perhaps your learners are now coming in through what has become common and technology-facilitated online learning environments, particularly used in college and corporate settings. And where are your students learning? Is it in face-to-face settings? Is it in work from home or from desktop-type applications? Or perhaps they're working in a conference area? And is the learning going to be done independently or done collectively? And did your learners need to make any adjustments, such as learning how to work from new environments? And as we turn to the learner, you're going to need to consider what has now become known as the digital native versus digital immigrant continuum. And it was first brought forward by Prensky in 2001. And though later on researchers and other pundits have been updating his thinking, you still need to consider whether you're going to have a mixture of interests and abilities among your students based on when they were initially exposed to technologies. Now, although older students may have a reduced comfort level at the computer, they can bring wisdom and insights that can serve well when you're structuring mixed learning environments, and that can help promote community learning and support. So you can see that many situations will need to be weighed to allow you to ultimately develop productive approaches in the rich digital environments that are available today. Key foundational principles about how we learn and communicate underlie many of the pedagogical approaches that have emerged. Piaget, from the 1950s, began studying how the mind develops schema, how it grows through reasonable struggles, and how it matures over time. Vygotsky studied the social environment that supports learning. And among other things, Brunner acknowledged the need for instructors to develop supports, whereas Maslow and Knowles considered the important role of motivation. and an information processing model from computer science has suggested ways that sensory data can be moved to more permanent locations. Piaget and Vygotsky are two key scholars from the 20th century, and then they still inform us today about how people learn, and we need to consider their ideas in designing our environments. Piaget, in his observations, noted that humans learn from struggle with problems that they can't solve directly. They assimilate the problem into what they already know and make a type of mental or procedural accommodation, which ultimately leads them to a better understanding of the challenging situation. Piaget also noted that as we go through this learning, we start with experiencing general, simple scenarios and schemas, and these develop over time into more complex understandings. And particularly important for K-12 teachers, Piaget also noticed that mental maturation processes develop over time, and that they become more abstract over time, thereby allowing different levels of learning. Vygotsky articulated the social aspects of learning, noting that people learn best when some individual or even some educational materials could nudge them along when they were within their zone of proximal development. That is, when they're actively in a learning, engaging process. Vygotsky's principles can really be seen in operation in teams and groups and peer reviews, and in collaboration and interactions among social communities of learners. And an analogy to computer information processing helps educators visualize how initial sensory input in the short-term memory, if given proper attention, can become more a permanent part of the long-term memory. The work of Maslow, who's known for his hierarchy of human needs, has been studied to find that in high-level learning environments, it's important to create challenges that move learners towards self-actualization. Ideally, learners should be intrinsically motivated to acquire information and skills. They should want to learn the topic. Malcolm Knowles, with the theory of andragogy, addresses how to teach adults, pointing out that it's important to involve the learner in the planning process and that materials themselves should be relevant to their lives. Learning by experience and making mistakes, along with creating problems to be solved more than simply content to be learned, should be at the heart of adult instruction. Obviously, K-12 classrooms should be applying these principles as well. Jerome Brunner considered the importance of scaffolding, where instructors develop activities and support that move learners towards the desired independence in their learning. Looking at how the content itself is communicated to the learner must begin with the historical hegemony of the lecture. That can be part of transmissive learning. A receptive audience can gain much from a well-organized and well-presented series of ideas, information, and visuals. The ways of integrating short segments of lecture within online or face-to-face interactions can optimize the effectiveness of an information transfer environment. Building communities among the learners, particularly if you can arrange for content area experts to join, can strengthen the learning by emphasizing the relevance of the knowledge itself. Also, learning environment communities can become supportive of the content and technology knowledge that needs to be acquired. The study of how novices learn from experts in apprenticeship scenarios emphasized how a community built with levels of expertise can scaffold the learning experience that are needed by the novices. Today, with social networking, it might be possible to bring in field experts, even if there's none available within geographic proximity. Research has shown that experts in the field, and those experts who also teach about the field, can take different approaches when they share their knowledge with others. Those content experts with the, quote, pedagogical content knowledge can extend their teaching prowess by reflecting on their own teaching and by talking with other teachers. They should also be open to listening to how the students themselves are thinking. And this understanding of the learning environment can be enhanced if these individuals conduct action research, where they study formally their own work. Designing and implementing instruction can be enhanced by creating a narrative, a storyline, or a theme, or even a game associated with the learning activity. Imagination, role-playing, creativity, and mystery sleuthing can provide a unifying framework that can work well within K-12 environments. Now, a college classroom could actually become a real resource of bringing content into this environment. And the business or industry could show the reality of the application of the knowledge gained itself. Now, lessons today can also be turned into games, often supported by application software that's available. However, students can be rather sophisticated with their expectations of games. So just having a video-like interface may not necessarily make instruction into a game. Inquiry-based learning is based upon the principle of digging into an important question. Research is then conducted around the questions, findings are presented to others, and answers, growth, and reflection can follow. This approach is often used in science education and other K-12 classroom scenarios. The model works well in higher education and in corporate areas where inquiry into authentic problems within the discipline or the institution can encourage a productive inquiry-based culture that can really work towards solving real problems. So inquiry approaches create that authentic learn-by-doing experience. Optimizing the intersection of the sometimes separately considered domains of technology, content, and pedagogy can create effective learning environments. The International Society of Technology in Education has endorsed the TPAC approach within their training programs. The TPAC organization provides rich examples of how to integrate this approach into digitally enhanced learning. Designing a learning environment around a project can also enhance the effectiveness of the work if the project itself is authentic, engaging, and made available beyond the classroom environment. Higher education and corporate training can really produce products that can further support communities beyond their immediate settings. Again, use social media to help bring in stakeholders that might be beyond the immediate learning environment settings. Within the STEM courses, that is science, technology, engineering, math, contributed to by the arts, we have generated many projects that include things such as using a 360 camera for teaching maritime docking of vessels, studying motion in a physics classroom through a digital monitoring device, and having students make their own gadgets and widgets in a Canadian museum. These are only examples, and many more activities have and can be created, particularly during some of the elective courses within the MALET program. Problem-based learning works on the principle of exposing students to an actual or case study problem within the learning settings. This is sometimes done with medical, healthcare, social services, or professional training. The model known as the 5 E's provides guidance towards including different practices within a learning setting, which give the learners a chance to explain the content, explore it more deeply, have their minds engaged in the interaction with the content, and then elaborate on what they've learned. The instructor should be mindful of evaluating what's transpiring and making changes as the project goes along. And these projects can be aligned with a number of other project-based and problem-based designs. Although this is probably most frequently used in science education, this model can be applied to all learning communities. The universal design for learning approach comes out of the special needs environments and builds on the need for flexibly designed learning environments so that all learners can participate Generally, this means having multiple ways by which learners can engage in specific activities. Using technologies effectively can provide more opportunities for participation in and using content knowledge. The UDL organization provides rich pedagogical supports for those designing UDL environments. The approaches considered within this presentation can generally be applied to a wide range of learning and communication environments and can work with varying degrees of technology. If you're just beginning in the MALET program, you may be limited to technologies you've already used in the past. Within the different electives, you'll have opportunities to explore more advanced edges of technology, perhaps considering ways that meetings can be conducted socially, virtually, and at a distance, or looking at technologies that can support the arts and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and even possibly stepping into the new three-dimensional worlds of virtual, augmented, and 360 realities that are becoming available through applications and through advanced video camera work. So remember to return and find a good instructional framework when you learn about these exciting new tools. Returning to the opening premise, that along with the many new tools that are becoming available, the emerging needs for instruction must move outside of the simple face-to-face environments, and we have to take our broadening understanding of how people learn, use the plethora of tools and approaches that are becoming available, and continuously promote and look at the research in the applied and theoretical levels. Make sure that your radar is attuned to the many new ways that are approaching and coming available to enhance teaching and learning for a variety of audiences. Thank you.